All right. Happy Tuesday and welcome everyone to another Learning Tech Talks where we are continuing to explore the landscape of learning, workplace tech, all things learning. And what's funny about this one today. So we're talking about video. We're just talking about video and all things related to it. So you might think, does that mean user generated content? Yes. Does that mean video production? Yes. Does it mean work? We're going to get into all of this. And to help me with that conversation, I am rejoined by John Hudson and Tara Ellis from LUMA1, which we were talking about this backstage before. And the last time we were together was February 7th of 2020. So literally right before the pandemic hit. So it's been a bit since we've had a conversation. So lots of updates to go into here. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. So I'm glad to have you both joining me. And I think we've got a lot to cover.
It's great to be here.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, no, I'm looking forward to it. So before we get into it, just some housekeeping items for folks, just as kind of a fun warm up to things. So where are you both located right now in the world for folks? And if you're joining, watching, listening, wherever you are, feel free to comment in and share where you are as well. But John, let's start with you. Where are you right now? Even though you have a virtual background, you're a little deceitful.
Exactly. Yeah. No. So I'm from the East, and I vowed last winter was the end. Right. I kind of jest, but actually I'm on Vancouver Island in British Columbia, Canada today. That's where I am. So I'm traveling around. That's it.
All right. Has winter hit? Has winter hit yet for you?
Not at all.
Not at all.
Not at all.
All right. I'll wait till my turn. But all right, Tara, how about you?
I'm in Ottawa, Canada, and I would say today was the first day where I had to scrape the car to warm it up. Okay. So yeah, it's starting. Right. Winter is coming. Okay. Winter is coming.
All right. Sure. Well, no, see, so that's the thing. So I'm in Milwaukee where I always am. But the reason I was curious is let me actually flip this around here. So if you look, we got the first snow today, and we're supposed to get 5 to 6 inches. So we're about to get buried here, which I'm not looking forward to all of that happening. We're gonna get some snow. Might have to actually pull out the snowblower today, which I'm not looking forward to. So anyway, it's coming your way. It's coming your way because it's moving up north.
Yeah.
All right. So since it's been over 2.5 years since you're on, there may be folks who join or listen to this who didn't hear our original conversation. So let's talk a little bit about what is LUMA1 for folks who may have not heard of it, or, obviously we're talking interactive video, so you can draw your own conclusions onto what it is. But I'd love for both of you to kind of tag team. How do you describe it, when you're talking to somebody who's exploring it as a product?
Sure. I at the heart of it, it's about video, obviously. And both Tara and I are co-founders with a few other on our team. And we really wanted to take video and amplify the power of video with interactivity. So we spent a lot of time doing that and, building that tech, and also looking at instructional strategies, things that you could do with LUMA1, and tools, things like, for example, adaptive learning and prescriptive learning. Those are things that you find in the heart of LUMA1. But we've also spent a lot of time with AI as well. So making it faster to actually create content using AI. And that particularly comes into play when you're doing things like localization. That's a thing. Or gaining insight from users to help them learn faster and better. I think that's my perspective on it. Tara, how about you? What else have I missed there?
I want to dig on that one a little bit, but I'm going to let Tara kind of do her overview because I would be really fascinated on that one. So Tara, you're up.
Sure. I'd probably describe it as a smart learning platform where you're able to make meaningful experiences for your viewers. I feel that no one has the biggest complaint I talk to anybody, they do not have time. So I think a key piece is making it easy to capture, to manage, to edit, and then share smart learning. So that's it.
Yeah, I think.
All right. Go for it.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great point. I think one of the things that we found in our last business which was actually in the learning content management space, back in the noughts. And it's all about making content simple to make, right? So you can really keep up with the speed of business. That's a really important facet of our work, And on the other side of that, of course, is being able to create, as Tara mentioned, these really engaging journeys that are really impactful and, create higher levels of retention than you can get, from, still very common ways of training, which is in the class as an example, right? That still is a dominant form of knowledge transfer, right? When it comes right down to it, knowledge sharing.
Well, and I think that's, I'm going to go into, I want to follow up on your comment on AI, John. But before I do, because to me, my understanding is I've gotten to know LUMA1 a bit. You cross a couple different lines in terms of the categories you would play in, which I think is helpful because the market is a bit ambiguous for people sometimes. And they hear a lot of terms and they're like, okay, learning. You play, if I'm understanding right, one of the things I think you do really well is you play in this kind of the video, taking video. And I think what you're getting at, Tara, with the smart content is how do you actually take video and make video come to life in some regards, which I think is, it's not as hard as some people think, which I think is unfortunate because sometimes people avoid video because they think it's really hard and they stay away from it. But I think there is some complexity to it, which is why people tend to stay away. And I think you've done a good job of helping bring some of that to life. But there's also an experience component to it as well. So it's not just I think there's some tools out there that are back end tools, and then that back end content gets put into something separate. You're blurring the lines between, you're playing in the content production area specifically around video, but then you're also in that content experience piece as well. I'm mirroring that back well. Is that fair?
That's fair. 100%.
Okay. So I want to dig into the one though that you hit on, John, that is one that may not necessarily jump to mind for folks is AI in video. I want to blow this out a little bit, and then we're going to get into more of the actually bringing video to life in an organization, because that's not something that I think a lot of people put 2 and 2 together on when they think of video, is the application of artificial intelligence and its intersection with video content. And well, how would that actually have anything to do with video content? And you described kind of 2 components to that. So I'm actually really curious how you're leveraging that tech for that, because I've seen it used in a lot of different ways. Sure. But whenever I hear the AI conversation, I'm always like, I really want to hear how you're applying that, because I think it's fascinating. I think there's so much potential.
Sure. I think one of the very big challenges almost every one of our customers has is localization, or being able to create content in one language, right? And make it available across multiple languages. You look at factories in New York State, for example, or Michigan, it's filled with different people from different places, right? In the UK, you have a lot of it as well. I mean, the workforces that we have now are very, very diverse, and organizations, need to accommodate them in a way where they can gain knowledge to do their work. That's an important thing. So we've spent a lot of time at LUMA1 mastering that. So for example, you can create content in English and make it available in Spanish and Creole, for example, literally within minutes. We had an experience last year where we were helping a hospital system create content for emergency use, right? So trauma treatment. And we were able to basically take that in English and make it available in other languages, like Ukraine, for example, literally within days, complete, right? So you think of 26 predominant trauma-related treatments in a hospital or emergency setting. That was done just literally within days and made available, right? So it's that level of simplicity, and of course behind all of that is machine learning. So you're not necessarily going to get the nuances right the first time, but as you go through and as you adjust it, it gets smarter and smarter and smarter. So literally, as a business, you can get to a place where things like translations are, 99.9% accurate, and then you synthesize the voice, and you're done. You're good.
Well, The part about that, because I also want to hear the other side of that. There was another component, but I want to hit on this localization piece, because sometimes in conversations, I talk to folks who may not necessarily be in big global organizations, and they write off localization as a priority because it's say, well, I don't, we're not a global company, things like that. But the thing you brought up, and I think this is a really important part that needs to be more focused in our field in the accessibility space, is even in a single country, there are lots of different languages being spoken. And English is not, we often operate under this assumption that, oh, English is everyone's primary language, and it's not. And I think that to me is, that's why I wanted to go into this a little bit, because the idea that video content, sometimes it's one of the reasons people avoid it, because they go, well, either one, we can't localize it very well, or, our audience just isn't going to be able to consume it very well because we have such a diverse group. And I think that application of AI to say, well, not necessarily anymore, because with machine learning and NLU, we can actually get much better at taking the voice, actually figuring out what's being said, then quickly translate it in other languages so people can actually watch it and see what's being said, even if that's not their primary.
Yeah, 100%. I think and I see it used actually in some very surprising situations. There's a factory in Kentucky that uses LUMA1, and, both languages, English and Spanish, right, are absolutely in use. They don't have a large workforce in that particular plant, but they've got a very diverse workforce.
Yeah,
I think that's it. And you see it now, and you'll see it more and more. One of our customers just built out some telehealth training, actually for end users, for patients, and okay. I was so surprised. New York State. Spanish you would expect. Creole, that's a thing, right? So
yeah,
just again, reaching the diverse population, it's a real thing. It is a real thing. Yeah.
And some of these assumptions we make are actually really detrimental to the workforce, because it's not recognizing the fact that a lot of this content that a lot of time and energy is going into is completely inaccessible, or it's missing. It's just most of it is going over the audience's head, because I cannot translate or understand really what's being said, because I don't understand. And especially in America, I mean, we've got so many phrases and sayings and things that don't always translate very well. And so we assume, oh yeah, everybody understands what I mean, and they don't. So I think it's a really important call out.
Yeah, no, it really is. And I think that at LUMA1, what we spend so much of our time doing is making video making a less daunting experience. That's a thing. And back to your point too, Christopher, things like localization, it just, if I had an experience 10 years ago making a video and localizing it into a few languages, and I use that as terrible, right? And it's just not like that anymore. I mean, literally you can, jump into LUMA1, you can turn on the screen recorder, you can make something, you can have it in French and Spanish, literally within minutes, and out to your team, right? So it's that ability, to synchronize and keep everyone on the same page, I think, which is so important. And I think we all have the bias again, in North America, that it's all English. But again, just because of demographics, that's all changing. And I think, if we want to get it right as businesses, we've got to cater to people and, make sure they have optimized learning experiences. And being able to communicate is an incredibly important thing, obviously, right?
Yeah. And the excuse that it's hard, to your point, the excuse that it's too hard, which was a legitimate pushback before. It used to be very time consuming, very expensive, not necessarily scalable for a lot of organizations. So I understand where that came from. But I think this is one of the things that I see with AI doing tremendous advancement in terms of accessibility for people to be able to say, listen, we can make content accessible to people very easily, which we couldn't before. So, okay, was there another component to the AI piece? Because I know I took a little bit of a digression.
Sure,
It was one of those, like, we got to call that out.
Sure. For like another big part of the story with AI and LUMA1 is data and understanding the users and helping them through their user journeys, right? So being able to prescribe content for them, as they're going through things, and that's done through a variety of different mechanisms. But again, that's another important thing, to be able to match content with a person. So it's not just it's personalization really at the end of the day, and that's that's understanding their language, understanding their knowledge levels, and those sorts of things. So you can actually create an experience that truly engages them, right? And
Yep.
What we all care about at the end of the day is having people perform well at their job, and that's making sure they have the knowledge that they need, and that's really at the heart of LUMA1. And we talked about it last time, Christopher. The idea that video for us is such a passion because it has both context and content. You can see things, and you can see them within the context. And Tara will probably show a few interesting situational awareness examples later, but it's just all there, and really giving people the experience, immersing them in a very simple way. And it's not, it doesn't have to be VR to be an immersive experience, right?
No.
You can really take people to the place of work, and you can really show them things, and you can let them try things, right?
Yeah.
And that can all be done in a very simple way. Yeah.
It's funny, and Kit, I'll respond to your comment here, but your point on, I think sometimes we forget how powerful video is in terms of making people feel like they're part of the experience. And I think this is one of the things where there is a lot of conversation around immersive from a true immersive tech. And I'm a big advocate of it. I think it's a great possibility. I think there's tons of opportunity, but I don't think it's in conflict or competition with video, because at the end of the day, I think video also offers a ton of rich experience and can do a ton of, I mean, honestly, it's kind of funny. The number of people I'll encounter who literally, like, I'll have a one-on-one Zoom meeting with, and they feel like they know my house because they've seen this office setup so many times that it's one of those, like, I feel like I know what it's like because I've seen your camera pan around, enough type of things. I think sometimes we forget that we can actually communicate experience and humanity in many ways through video that I think sometimes we just don't necessarily recognize. What I was going to do, and then I'll transition here, just to your point on Kit. I agree with your point that the NLU is not perfect yet, and I think everybody here would agree that it's not perfect compared to what it was. And I think, John, your point, and I agree with this. 10 years ago, you looked at what you had to do to try and localize content. It was awful. It was truly awful, the amount of effort of going through and somebody trying to listen and actually go through it. So even getting to a point now where, some of the stuff I've done, 2010, like, we're getting down into the single digits, even in some cases where it's pretty minimal. And I think that's really the point we're highlighting, is it the silver bullet? Does it eliminate the need to do anything? No. But this will also tie to our part later in the conversation around the role of learning and development and the instructional designer.
For sure. I mean, there still is work there, but something like a transcription, for example, which, if you go back 10 years ago or 5 years ago or even 3 years ago, getting a solid transcript, right, from a video without paying somebody a lot of money to do it was a very rare thing. Now, just with our tech, and I know it's very similar across the board, it's highly accurate, right? It's kind of, 98%, 99% accurate, off the bat. And translations are edging into that place as well. And, again, it's a tool, it's a tool. It still needs human, oversight, but it's getting so much faster, right? That's it.
Well, and I think to some degree that should be encouraging to people, because I think it highlights the fact that there still will be a role for us in even the latest in tech with things. And I think sometimes when I hear the doom and gloom apocalyptic, the machines are coming for us. No, there's actually still a significant role we play in it, but that role is different. So will somebody be listening and sitting and writing every word in a transcription? No, I would certainly hope not, because machine learning is much faster at it. But now that role becomes reviewing the 80, 90, 98% accurate transcript to say, well, let me kind of actually make some modification, which, I've got software now. I can do that like a Word document,
right?
And it edits it in real time. And you're like, that's how quickly you can do it now. So it's just a different role.
Yep.
It is. It is.
Okay. So I want to transition, though, now to kind of this whole video assumptions. And Tara, I'd love your take on this, because I think there is still, we joked before we went live about the fact that in some ways people now assume that because everybody's on Zoom and everybody's on YouTube and all this stuff, that everybody's just creating video now. It's just a thing that everybody does and everybody's comfortable with. And that's not, John, you made a mention of the statistics, but I'd also love to hear, Tara, kind of how does that actually play out in orgs? Is there some truth to that? Where do we stand?
Well, I feel that there is that assumption, but then you try to apply things like capturing that user generated content, for example, and there's this hesitance or roadblocks that actually occur. So, in working with our clients, we talk through how do we make this simple. Instead of asking someone, something very generic that you're great at this, could you share your whole thoughts on, a certain topic? Maybe ask a specific question, solve one specific problem. And so we do have the ability just to send a question out to, those subject matter experts or people in the, an aging workforce that you want to capture their expertise and bring that back in. So being very specific, keeping it simple, sending out just, a basic question, you can bring that content in and modify, edit, put it together, and then distribute to your audience. So I think it's just keeping it simple, short is a key piece in that side.
Okay.
So it's really good point, I think. And one of the things that you can do with LUMA1 is you can actually bring people comfort. You can ask them that question, as Tara mentioned. You can tell them how to capture something, and then literally using the actual software, capture it. Right. So it's all one experience. And we found organizations that are just even trying to gather insight from their employees. It's a great way to survey as well. Right. So you actually do something that's animated. You ask the question, right? You frame the question, you ask the question, and give people tools they need to answer it well. That's great. And all of that, is captured and it can be shared very easily.
Well, and I think we joked about it backstage, but I think it's one of these things where these barriers are real. And I think operating off the assumption that because everyone has a phone or everybody's been on a Zoom meeting, so they've been on camera before, they're somehow going to be comfortable with generating content. It's not an assumption, or it's an assumption you can make, but you know what they say about assumptions. And I think that's one of the ones that I've seen in our industry has fallen flat. But I think this point of making it easier for people is really helpful with that. And I would love to just hear if you've seen, you highlighted one of the best practices that you've seen, but I'm curious if other ones come out, because even that simple thing, like you said, I think sometimes, just to give an example that I've seen where people have said, we want people to share a best practice. So they frame it that way. Send in a best practice. And honestly, it leaves people really, really uncomfortable with even knowing what to share. Like, how long do what do I even do with it? It's like asking somebody, tell me about yourself. I mean, it's too broad. So I think your point about being more targeted and actually doing that, are there any other things that you've seen that have helped kind of close this gap of people just being maybe more resistant to create content?
One example that I'm thinking of, we have a client that had shared a question, how do you fix this piece of equipment? So, when this piece of machinery is down, what do you do to fix it? So, being very specific, very direct is a key piece. And then, letting them know it's a short video that they're sharing, but it's coming in and I'm going to, I can modify it, edit it. So they don't have to be owning the whole responsibility of that piece of content. It's coming in and I can, manipulate as needed before sharing. So curating.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So because to that point, this hits on both a workflow, but even setting expectations with people, because what we're talking about from a capability standpoint, part of it is the ability to actually, you're not just asking people to create something and then it's just raw going out the door to someone, which I think we'll talk about the role of an ID that can help play in this. But even remembering to communicate that to people, I can totally see being something that people just forget to do. They're just like, hey, create this thing.
Exactly.
And then people get stressed out because they're like, oh, I got to get it perfect. And that one I stammered on this word. And I got a little long-winded on this type of a thing. And it can leave them to feel like, oh, I'm just not even going to participate. But even that simple action of, this is something that you're going to create, do your best, but we're actually going to be curating and modifying some of this. So don't stress about little things like that. Could be a simple way to just help, again, reduce some of the agita people may have about actually generating a piece of content.
So true. And I do think from, certainly a LUMA1 perspective as well, some people do have anxiety in front of a camera, even a phone, right? They really do.
Yeah.
And they're, so that's something that people can be coached through as well. And so that's something that we can do for customers as well. Coach them through those things, actually train people to coach people, right? That's a thing as well. So for us, we have that, significant knowledge transfer aspect to our business as well, making sure that we can help people help other people, if that makes sense as well. Because that is a thing. It really is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and even to that point, what you just hit on there, which would be something I see happen a lot from the practitioner side that I would just advocate for, but I'm curious if this is something that you would I would guess you probably would, but again, where you draw the line is the fact that sometimes, and I talked about this with Valamis last week, is that sometimes it's easy for practitioners to look at the tech provider they're partnering with as just the source of tech. Like you have the tech, and then once we get the tech, we got to figure out what we're going to do with it, versus saying you're working with a lot of different people who are doing this kind of stuff. So rather than reinventing the wheel or going off into your own world and trying to invent what we should do or how we should use this, actually teaming up or asking questions like, what have you learned from other people? Do you have any recommendations how we can kind of actually overcome this? Or if you're running into barriers, seeing, hey, have you had other people run into this and how have you overcome it? I see that as a miss where people just don't think about it. They don't think to actually engage with their customer success folks, which, Tara, I hate to put you on the spot because you'd be that person they, at least in some regards, be involved with. But I think that's an important part.
Yep. I see it more as a partnership, really, as we work with them. And by the time that it really is quite easy for someone to learn the application, our platform. But I think the key piece is just giving them the tools that they need for all those other pieces. So presenting on camera, setting up for capturing content, what type of equipment. We do have resources that can help with all of those pieces. So, just first interviewing the client and seeing what those gaps are and how we can kind of partner and get them through their first deliverable, and then making sure that they have the toolkit to go forward on their own. So.
Okay. So one other question I have on this one that I'm just kind of curious with the scope of folks you're working with and really playing in this space. I do sometimes hear comments about kind of the generational differences of folks. I get a little leery when people start making stereotypes about, oh, this generation, this generation, that. But I am curious if do you see trends with that? Is there generational differences that you like? Is there a huge difference between boomers and engaging with user-generated content versus Gen Zers? I mean, are there any insights associated with that you've run into, or is it actually not all that different?
It's kind of funny, part of the pandemic, and the last time we spoke, we absolutely were confronted with the realities of there's a very small percentage of people making content or feeling comfortable doing it, and I think through the pandemic, we did really well. I mean, we embraced a lot of new customers. That was really excellent, and helped them through it for sure. But now that we're out of it, or at this other stage of it now, I don't think it's changed very much at all. I think that's, and Tara, I don't know if you have any other perspective on that, but it's kind of like you go through this black hole and you come out the other side, and it's like, okay, wow, it's the same thing almost,
I like that you bring that up though, because you do hear the rhetoric around the pandemic is like the world is a different world on the other side of this. And I think there's some truth that can be attributed to that. But then there's other things where I look at it and go, I don't know. Some things look very much the same as they did before, maybe with a slightly different flavor, but for the most part, we're still talking about some of the same stuff.
I think, I don't know what your perspectives on that are.
I think, just looking at different industries, some have not changed at all. Yeah, I think it can be industry specific as well too. So
okay.
Yeah. Interesting.
Well, and I think it's just one of those cautions that we have to make whenever we think about it. I mean, we talked about assumptions about, well, people are comfortable creating content. We can make assumptions about other things too, like, oh, all these Gen Zers, they're on Instagram all the time doing all this other stuff. So I'm sure they'll be great at all this stuff. Let's just roll it out to them and then watch the seas open up.
I mean, Christopher, you still can't get away without intention when you make content, right? You need intent. It needs to be intentfully made. You've got to practice in front of the camera. This is all 101 stuff. We all know it. I mean, most of us that are on the this session today, we're trainers. We're involved with the process. We're involved with communication. You know that. You're going to do, if you're well honed, well practiced, you're going to probably deliver very well, right? It's just a thing. So you can't take intention out of the mix. It's still a thing, right? And I think that's really what we're talking about. All the tools, I think, through the pandemic, I certainly look at LUMA1 from a just our perspective. We've done things like added screen recording and video capture tools, and automating editing and things like that. It helps a lot, right? But it still comes down to the delivery and the importance of, I think, instructional design and, the content and the subject matter expertise, the things you're kind of trying to convey. So that still is there. I mean, good content still needs to be good content, right? It's just a thing.
Well, and I want to get into some of the role that L&D plays in some of this, because I do see a lot of misunderstandings about L&D's role or things like that, or that you can just turn this on and magically the organization will do it. Because even to the point of, even if, let's say, the stereotype was true and Gen Zers loved producing content and you could just unleash it on them, if you were to just take the quality, to your point of intent, the quality of content that's probably being created isn't always all that great anyway. So it's not something you would want to necessarily just turn on and dump out on the organization. Because good grief, go to YouTube. There's a ton of trash on YouTube. I mean, just because there's lots of content being created does not mean all content is created equal. And I think that'll tie to kind of the role of L&D in this curation, the ID space. But before we do, I actually do want to take a little time, because it is a product show, to talk a little bit more specifically about LUMA1 from a product standpoint, because we've been talking about this from a thought leadership, strategic standpoint. But sometimes I think people struggle with understanding, how does it work? In terms of if I were to actually operationalize something like this, and I think we may be able to tie it to LUMA1 specifically, but even just talking about how does this actually come together from a video workflow and taking an idea or a best practice from someone and actually turning it into something that can then be used across the organization. So that's kind of my question back to you.
Sure.
What does that workflow look like? Like, how does it actually bring that to life? Because I think it can be confusing if you haven't done it before.
Sure. I think Tara, you have a bunch of good examples. I certainly do as well. I think, we've seen situations, for example, in the area of health and safety, we have a, for example, a customer, there's an incident. And what they'll actually do is they'll use that as a point of knowledge capture. So a customer, they manufacture paper products. They have these 1,000-pound rolls of paper, and when they fall off a forklift, there's a real trick to getting them back on a forklift, right? So they've got a process and a technique. Okay. So when that happens, what they'll do is they'll pull out their mobile phone. We have a web app, and they'll actually capture that directly into LUMA1. That process, right? So that'll be a clip of video.
So something as simple as, it's in manufacturing situation, there's this thing that happens.
Yeah.
It happens probably somewhat frequently, not all the time, but frequently enough. And fixing it isn't just something that intuitively you'd be like, oh, you just pick it up. There's
Right.
something to it. And it's like, well, we could try and explain that to people, but we wouldn't be able to do it justice.
Right, exactly. So there's so many different applications for it, and I think just getting started on the journey, we've seen so many different ways. I mean, it's during the pandemic, Zoom was a big thing, a big knowledge transfer tool, right, for sure, and a big collaboration tool. So recording and editing Zoom, and using it for training and for certifications even, or taking a keynote or PowerPoint and making that into a video, and adding interactivity to it and translating it. So there's just all of these sort of simple applications, simple ways to sort of get into it, and I think just starting to move and starting to use video is something that we should all be trying to do, because it is just such a powerful tool, even just on its own. But when you start, we'll start with that, and certainly, Tara's expertise, helping customers on their journeys more specifically. But I've just seen so many different, actually surprising applications. Customers coming up with these animated surveys, asking their employees and having someone walk them through a survey, gathering insight and employee perspectives. It's just so different than a Survey Monkey, form. Right.
So people are actually using it for like survey information, like actually capturing insights from employees.
They are. Yeah. So it's a really cool application, and you can do the same thing, asking assessment questions as well. So you can animate them, you can talk people through things, and you can contextualize things through video. So there's so much you can do. It's simple. I mean, it can be really literally a webcam and just walk people through, and it's a really interesting way to do it, and we've seen the participation rates really rise because of that as well, versus sort of common approaches. So that's pretty cool.
Well, Tara, and so kind of looking, and Tara, I want to talk to you about some of these, but as we get into some of these, the things you mentioned, I don't think people always think of how video can play some of these, because some of the examples you gave would be ones that people could kind of overlook and be like, I guess I hadn't really thought about that as a source of content, like a Zoom meeting. A lot of times it's like a joke to be like, yeah, you could record a Zoom, but like, who's going to watch it? Well, yeah, if you just shove a Zoom meeting out there, people wouldn't. But even that example, the one that just jumped out at me is the use of it for a survey thing. I just think of like culture surveys and things like that, and they lack so much context a lot of times. Like you hear somebody mark something and you don't really understand what their thinking behind it was, or what triggered them to have that response, or was it said in like a sarcastic jest, or was it just, that comes through in video. It does not come through in a multiple choice Survey Monkey where it's like, how do you feel about working here? Great. I mean, is that like really great? Was that like, yeah, great. Yeah. I mean, there's so much that comes through in audio and video that you cannot see in just a generic text-based response. So that one just jumped out at me as like, wow, I guess I wouldn't have even thought of that as like a way to use video workflows for capturing user insights.
Even making it easier to respond as well. So if you're on a mobile phone, you're going to keep your answers very short. If you're answering, if you send somebody an open answer question, what do you think about, the company or whatever you ask, they're going to keep it short.
It's great.
But if they don't have to sit there with their thumbs and type everything out, you can respond with audio or you can respond with video. So giving those extra options, you're more likely to have higher response rates to your questions. So that's a nice element as well.
No, and I even just think of like best practices. I mean, all these things, if you ask somebody a really good question, they can't help but articulate what is going through their head and what they're saying and all this other stuff. So that was just one of the ones I'm like, that's actually pretty brilliant. The customer that came up with that, to be like, how do you feel, trying to capture user insights, really powerful way to do that, to be able to actually see, hear from your actual users versus the ambiguous ether of employee feedback coming through a Survey Monkey.
It's personalized from both ends. I get a personalized response, I feel, and I can personalize the questions that I send out. So it just changes the experience.
So then my question back to you, based on what you just described right there, Tara, is some of the workflow then, are people actually then responding back to that as well? So people are sending video. I mean, how are those workflows actually playing out?
With regard to the survey side, yes. So, in a most recent example, one of the organizers, they have like an annual meeting, and they weren't able to do that in person. And so she spoke through a survey and asked the questions, and then had some of those nice open answer questions at the end where she opened it up for people to give video-based responses. And it was lovely to see all of that input come back to her, where she was able to go through all of the different video-based responses to different questions. And a lot more information can be captured. So she really found a higher response rate than any previous surveys, which was nice. And then also just having content that come in that she could also repurpose and use even in marketing. You're capturing testimonials. That could be, you could ask permission and say, can I share this? So it's just a nice element.
Well, and I just think your point there of, we talked about how a lot of these use cases, I mean, we're generating lots of content, or we have lots of opportunities to generate content that often go missed or just unthought of. We just don't think about them with some of those things. But even to your point, some of those, the responses from people responding to a question about whatever it was, the really positive ones, the things that, may be really great, the ability to then repurpose that content and say, hey, we might be able to use this as part of our employment branding, the way we onboard new users, to hear from other people about the things that they really value about this organization, things like that. It now becomes a multi-purposed piece of content versus, we got a bunch of survey responses. That's it. It's dead. We move on, and then it just goes in the digital waste bin in some ways.
Yep. Brings it to life.
Yeah. No, I like, again, I think that's where, to me, going back to this whole, I feel like sometimes we miss the opportunity to actually engage with the partners and hear from them. What are some of the creative things that people are doing with this? Because sometimes those outside the box ones are ones that we just wouldn't necessarily think about with our traditional L&D toolkit.
Yep.
I think with video and certainly interactivity, well, I'll call it authenticity, but you get to show real. You get to show, again, you get back to the context and the content, and just the engagement. I mean, it can be exponentially more engaging than other methods. It just can be. It's just you can really capture the viewer in so many different ways, and we've seen it work so well. Across a wide range of content as well.
Well, I just think of it's kind of more of a joke, but I mean, in reality, I give my parents a hard time sometimes. They're never going to watch this, so it's fine. I can say this. But their text messaging etiquette, when we think about text, sometimes the things that we text, or the things that come across in text, you're like, what does that mean? Right. And it can come across very differently than we intended. Like even something as simple as, I need to talk to you. Like, did something bad happen? Am I in trouble? Type of a thing versus, hey, I need to talk to you about, again, some of that authenticity cannot come through other mediums. Going back to this point of, we talk a lot about the need for video, but we don't always talk about why it's so relevant to, really actually driving things forward.
Yep.
Okay. So in terms of, you did have a few things, Tara, that we wanted to kind of pull up, if you do have them, to kind of talk about some of these things, to at least give people a chance to react or see, how does this actually work? Because again, we talk about a lot of these things, and I guess some folks may be able to kind of in their head piece together how that might work. But I think sometimes it's really helpful to actually see what that looks like, if you're good with that.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
So I'm sharing my screen. That's okay.
All right. We're good. Yep.
Good. So yeah, I do have a few different examples. And I'll start here with one piece of content. So I just pulled a little snippet here, and just to show adaptive learning. So here we're presenting a question, And I'm going to answer incorrectly here. So this could be set up many different ways. You know, I could have it as a hotspot, so I could click on the area, you know, where he's missing a piece of PPE equipment. But I created this just as a multiple choice question in this example. So if I click incorrectly, it's jumping out, or I can have it auto jump out, or click the link to review. And it's bringing me to more information where I can learn about PPE. So reviewing that PPE content and bringing me back. I just created it as a quick example to show you how it works. And then you can set it as a multiple attempt for the question. So I'm going to say, okay, hard hat, answering it correctly, and I get that positive reinforcement and continue through the video. So just wanted to show that adaptive capability, and you can really set these things up as simple activities for your viewers.
Got it. So and that's actually then a video, because I'm even just thinking how that then interacts and interfaces in with kind of the tech stack, because that's an actual video object. That's not. Is that correct? Like, is that what you just showed there? That's an actual video that then's bouncing back and forth. So that's actually happening through the video player?
Yes, it is.
It is. So you can access any video in the library, or even external videos. For example, a YouTube video, and you can have those journeys, right, where you're dynamically sort of moving back and forth. Okay.
So you can ingest external video content and embed it into almost a bigger, this will go back to the role of an instructional designer to some degree, curating and creating a multi-dimensional experience with multiple different video objects that may not necessarily all be part of one piece of raw content.
Correct.
Yeah. And even SCORM, for example. So if you had a SCORM file that you wanted to drop into a playlist, that's a thing you can do as well. So you can start with your video, and then you can, sequence in SCORM as an example, and you can create journeys that way. So there's many different types of content that you can bring in to create those journeys.
Okay. Now, is the hub that we're seeing, or what we're seeing here, is this the end user experience, or would this be then where, if you're a end user, you're actually coming into it? Because I'm curious, just from a user experience standpoint, would this be like the library of content that an end user would then be able to experience, or this would be where you would manage it as a administrator or as an author type of a thing?
This here is a hub for the end user experience. This is one of the ways that you can share content. You can share it, embed it out to other sites. You can share QR codes. Maybe, if you're in a work environment, print out QR codes on piece of equipment. People can scan it, pop up videos. Lots of different ways it can be shared. But yeah, this is the viewers hub here.
Yeah. So
because that's what. Oh, go for it.
So quite typically, Christopher, it's a real mix and match. So for example, some content gets driven through LMSs. I alluded to that. There's an organization, they're a large chemical manufacturer. They use the hub, this thing you see right now on mobiles. It's single sign-on, and we're also linked to their LMS using a learning standard, right? So there's just different ways to do it.
Okay. Well, that's because, again, I think this is one of the things, and we can kind of talk a little bit about this, is, again, that flexible experience for a user is really important, because I think for a long time in our industry, there was this idea that we'll create the one destination everyone will always come to, when in reality, that's not really how work happens. To your point, even the example you used, you may be going to a piece of equipment. You're not thinking to yourself, I'm going to go look up a video for this type of a thing. You're thinking, oh, I recognize this QR code. This is probably going to give me some guidance on how to use this piece of equipment type of a thing. So it has the ability to then just directly give you access to that without having to say, now go to your LMS, look up for this, find it in your learning plan, type of do this. More on a performance resource, if I'm understanding correctly.
Yep.
Okay.
Good. Another example that I'll share, I think just that personalized experience. So this is just going to present questions.
Or no, it's not.
So we have a little bit of a quiz here. And as we go through, she's asking the question.
It's a medical emergency.
So based on how I answer the question, it's actually from an authoring side, it's branching out to different areas of content. So if I answer yes, it's jumping.
No, sorry. It's not a tell.
Or if I had have answered yes, then it would have jumped to different areas. So with the content that we create, I think that's a nice element, is being able to, branch someone based on how they interact with your content. And also on top of that, being able to add, to learn more, click for more information, because you have those different levels of learners. So you can give, the basis to everyone, but also those that need a bit more support. Being able to add that interactive capability, you can add additional information. So clicking for more, or providing job aids or documents as part of your authoring as well.
Well, and what I was going to ask on this, because obviously, like this example that I'm looking here, this is, you're probably not going to get two employees that are like sitting down and creating this multi-dimensional experience type of a thing where they've got a studio and setting this up. But what I am thinking about is, and just tell me if I'm off on my thinking, is you may be able to set something up like this where if I'm understanding how you could actually workflow this, where if someone gets something wrong or even gets something right, you may have a piece of user-generated content where somebody shares a relevant best practice that you say, we're now going to actually embed this into the workflow, because based on what we know you just did, here's actually this perfect relevant piece of content that's tied to this thing. So you're actually taking all these different video pieces that you may have captured from multiple places, even a piece of video content that you might find on YouTube, and say, here's actually a really relevant reason why it's important to do this certain thing based on, FDA standards or OSHA standards type of a thing from the OSHA website, instead of having to recreate that from scratch.
And what I've learned working with clients as well is that we all have our celebrities in the organization. So, if you're answering a question incorrectly, well, let's hear how, Joe does this. And so you could branch off and have that piece of user-generated content from Joe. And that's something that's really going to resonate with your viewers. So there's lots of different ways of branching and using and creating that exciting experience. So,
well, and I think that's an important piece, because I think this is where some of the creativity around how you can actually use it and what you can do with it goes back to, because we could keep talking for a long time, but I want to kind of tie what we just looked at back to kind of the role of learning, or whether it's L&D or whether it's, a different group, because you've talked about the fact it's not always traditional L&D. Sometimes it's a business function. But whatever that is, that creativity of how are you actually architecting some of these experiences in a much more dynamic fashion than, we took a Zoom video, we jammed it in here, we transcribed it, and now we made it available to everybody. Well, yeah, you could do that. It's probably not going to be terribly effective. But now the role is evolving to say, you've got a lot of possibilities of what you can do with this. How do you then architect and personalize it with, like you said, celebrities from the organization, or a really rich piece of content that comes from maybe a subject matter expert external to the organization that you then feed into this so that it feels very rich? And that's an advanced skill set.
Yep.
For sure.
And content comes from everywhere as well. We have just repurposing content and making it, a memorable learning experience. So I have CCTV, body cam footage that's been taken in, and you just add simple little elements to make it an engaging experience. So
that's really interesting, Tara. The body cam example you just mentioned. The first time I saw it, I actually had anxiety. Right, this is the thing, but it's a timed question. It's asking someone to answer it, and it's a simple thing.
Yeah.
So
you're actually stepping them through a live experience, but yet looping them into it to kind of say, like, think about this. What do you think is the right chance to actually do this?
So it's a time question, right? And so you're really looking at situational awareness and putting people in a real situation in a very simple way.
Yeah. Well, and what I like about this goes back to the fact that I think sometimes we forget that content is being created all over the place, but a lot of it just ends up going to waste. Like that example, the body cam demo, that was being captured already, type
100%.
of a thing. But then the role of the learning organization is to say, hey, wait a minute, let's take this. We know this is, I'm just even thinking where you might be able to think of, I mean, again, you would hope that you don't do this, but active shooter training is a big thing that I know is becoming something that's a big area of opportunity for organizations. Like, how do you prepare people for that? And a lot of times you may have security footage from an active shooter situation where you can say, like, and similar to what you just did there, and actually put somebody in that situation to say, what is your situational awareness, or what did you observe here? What could you do? How would you respond to this type of thing? To actually draw them into that experience instead of, a click and read PowerPoint that just presents some, examples that really don't give it the 3D feel that you would have in a video.
Exactly. And I think getting back to the earlier comments on creativity, that's such an important thing here. And I think one of the things that we love doing is we love jamming with our customers, collaborating with them, helping them, see different things that other organizations are doing with the technology, because it's incredibly powerful. Every police force in the world has body cam footage, right? Military, it's a thing, and
it's there. It's being captured all the time.
100%. And if you want real, that's real.
That's as real as it gets, because it's real.
It's real stuff. And we've got great examples of CCTV as well in use in the field as well. And some of the scenarios are unbelievable. But you think about that person in day one in a factory, to suddenly be able to gain the insight and become situationally aware of what it's all about quickly and efficiently. It's unbelievable. It just works so well. Yeah, works so well.
Well, and on that one, I think that point that you brought up, and I think this is going back to, again, emphasizing why when we think about this, actually looking at the teams that we partner with as partners, because what you just said, which is helping you see some of these things that you might not see. The example of like the closed caption footage that you might not even think about. You might just pass it off and go, oh, I didn't even really think about it, versus, hey, we actually captured something happening. Again, here I'm just, like you said, spitballing, but the possibilities of this, where you could capture something like this, actually engage people. You then take a user-generated story from someone who's had an experience with that kind of thing, sharing, what that was like for them. I mean, you can create a very rich, personalized experience with relative ease with some of these capabilities, if I'm hearing you correctly, which it sounds like you're helping a lot of people do.
Absolutely. And it really is. It's a lot of fun. And I think from an instructional design perspective as well, there's such opportunity. I mean, it really is. I mean, it's just there's so much to be done from that perspective as well.
Yeah. Well, like I said, I could see, now we're on the jamming side of like, what's the possibilities of this? But I think this is a really important piece for people to think about, because I think sometimes we can think very narrowly based on our limited experience. Well, this is what I did once, and that's as far as I can think about what's possible. But I think these possibilities of, the tech is enabling things that, I just even think what we just described with taking all of that. If you were to try and do that 5-10 years ago, that would be very difficult to try and capture all these different sources. You're going to have, Adobe Audition all together. You're going to try and stitch all these things together. It's going to be a static video that most people aren't even going to know what part of the video they actually want to go to. You would miss out on a lot of the possibilities, but I think now the possibilities are so much richer and easier to access. So this has been super fun. It was fun. I'm glad we got to the end to actually show it and actually talk about some of these possibilities, because I think for people out there who may be thinking like, video, how many best practices can you really share? Well, if that's all you're thinking about, but how you then architect and craft them, that goes back to this higher order thinking as our role as learning and development. How do we actually do more with that?
Absolutely. And anybody in the audience as well, I'll put this out there. If you're interested in engaging with us, having a conversation, we're very happy to show you some examples. And it's not a commercial message. We're just very passionate about video. I think we think it drives learning, and really, please be in touch. We'd
Yeah.
love to talk.
Well, I really appreciate you making the time, John and Tara, again, to join me on the show. 2.5 years have gone by, so it was good that we re-engaged and had this conversation. And hopefully for folks out there who may be thinking, yeah, we maybe could do more with video, chances are, yes, you could. There's probably a lot more, and it doesn't necessarily have to be putting a production studio into your corporate office to have to do something like that. So thanks for making the time and helping explore the possibilities.
Great, Christopher. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Enjoyed it.
Yep. Have a great week, and we'll be back next week, everybody.